So welcome again, my host, Mary Beth, and we have a special guest host, Fez, aka Jaime Sanchez, or Jaime Sanchez, aka Fez. And we are going to talk about Ron Howard's docudrama, Apollo 13, which we just passed the 50th anniversary of the actual the Apollo 13 mission. And so it was kind of timely. I know it's not really science fiction. They did take a little bit of license with the story, but not much. It was pretty accurate. So with no further ado, Fez, tell us about Apollo 13.
So,
And you were what, about 5 when this came out?
actually, I think I was 7.
7.
But it's one of the first movies I think I actually saw in the theater that was space related. I was telling you guys the other day that I've always been interested in space, basically, since before Apollo 13, with all the sci-fi stuff that I used to watch then and even now. But when I was a kid, I would absorb everything that was space related, going back to Apollo 11 with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And I actually dressed up as Neil Armstrong one year for school. So there's that. And I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, like many of you guys. So
gotta do the full thing here, guys.
Do the full thing.
There you go. Now I'm looking. By the way, all this stuff is available at Lunar Replicas. Our good friend Max Kaiserman runs that. So
before we go, thank you,
Very
Max. So before we go
authentic.
too much further, let's toast our 4 people who found us over here on YouTube. Sorry, guys.
Hey,
Cheers.
I don't know. Facebook was just really being a pain. It would not load. So
Facebook was doing the spinny circle of death.
any circle thing would not load.
I
You guys
can't
can
figure out
chat
how to
on-
make comments over
Yeah,
here.
you can chat. Oops, I hid the chat by accident. So you guys can chat. Just so you know.
How?
It's a spot right next to the video down low. I'll hear everyone say hi. I'll say hi to myself.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Hi, gang. Right there.
So before we go any further, this is my first podcast crossover since being a podcast.
Oh, welcome. Yeah, welcome. If you guys
That's
are
right.
not,
I forgot we should mention that Fez does his own podcast.
Fez does his own podcast. If you're not listening, Fez, can you tell them where they can find what it's called and where they can find it?
Tell us what they've won, Bob.
They've won a podcast named Fez Talks ... And they can find it basically wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Google, Anchor. You can even find it on Spotify, apparently. I found that out the other day.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. The I think it was you're on Anchor, so Anchor will distribute it to everybody. Pretty much all the popular podcast. So before we get any further, I want to share our drink of the day. So there it is, the Apollo 13, 2 ounces of white rum, a half an ounce of Grand Marnier, which is orange liqueur, Galliano. If you're Italian, you certainly know what that was if you grew up in an Italian home. It's a chartreuse-looking liqueur, a dash of grenadine, and 2 ounces of cream. Mix that together, strain, and put it over ice, and you're good to go. Mary Beth, you said you were trying that, right?
I'm trying that. This is what I put it in a blue glass so you can't really tell. Sorry. I confess I didn't have Galliano.
Yeah.
It's sorry.
What kind of an Italian are you?
Yeah, I tend to favor creamy drinks anyway, so I'm okay with it. But it's rummy. It's a rummy drink.
Rummy drink. I mixed a bunch of stuff with pineapple juice because I still have a half gallon that I'm trying to use. Anyway, people did tune in to hear about Apollo 13, and we have like barely touched the surface with this movie. So we're going to get rolling on Apollo 13. Came out in 1995, obviously directed by Ron Howard. I think it's probably his best film ever. One of the coolest things about it in 1995, when I saw it originally in the theater, the effects that he used were really mind blowing because they were the first time that we had a movie that was kind of NASA based or space program based, and they didn't use NASA footage, the actual footage of a launch. And he actually recreated everything in CGI. So you get these really cool shots of the rocket coming right at you, which obviously they couldn't really get in real life. And of course, all the space scenes. And they did film a lot in the Vomit Comet, which is how the astronauts trained for zero G so they could get the actual zero G correct. So it was really, at the time, it was pretty cutting edge. And it holds up, I think, by today. I just watched it again last night, and I said, this is just such a great movie overall, that I it really was so well done. And for me personally, I grew up knowing the story. A lot of people, I think, before the movie came out, they might have been aware that Apollo 13, that incident happened, but they weren't, a lot of people really didn't know, especially younger generation. But I was aware of it, and I always idolized not only the 3 astronauts, but the ground crew, the engineers, mission control operators that were able to get those guys home.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing story, and it's amazing it took them that long to actually make it into a feature film.
Yeah, it really is. It's inspiring.
It is. My wife used to tell you, I keep tearing up. She keeps tearing. Of course, she cries at the drop of a hat, but that's another thing.
Yeah, well, what I personally love is there was no whining or whinging or blaming or complaining. No. They assessed the situation, they evaluated, they put their heads down, they got to work.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like, I personally aspire to that. I wish I was more like that.
That's true. And to me, we always look at heroes as football players or and actors and whatnot, but those guys to me are my heroes, those astronauts and all of them really, and the mission control, because of what they were able to do. I know the tagline for the movie is "Failure is not an option." Actually, Gene Kranz never said that.
Yes, I was finding that out today.
They did that was for the film. There's a few little things, but really, even if you listen to the commentary, and Jim Lovell and his wife give a nice commentary on it, most of it was pretty accurate. They did take a little license. I think the argument between Hayes and Swaggart, when they're kind of arguing about blaming each other, blaming, whether they stirred the tanks and checked the pressure or whatever.
Yeah,
that never happened. That
was dramatic license.
Yeah, they did that, I think. But you could see that being, under stress. But what I always say is these guys were so professional. They're not the average person. You know what I'm saying? They were all test pilots prior to this, you know what I'm saying? So they were used to being under stress. They had worked together for months and months and months and months before they ever got in that capsule. So to say that, it's pretty believable that they were just going to be professional about it and knew that they could have died and they were okay, not okay with it, but they were, they weren't going to fall apart.
So one of the things that was actually really dramatized was the whole reacquisition when they're coming down, which was admittedly a long pause until they reacquired, but they dramatized it just a little bit further for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and actually, I believe in the actual mission, Lovell or whoever contacted, I think it was Swaggart that actually was the one on the radio, and he was actually talking to the helicopter that was going to pick them up before it got to mission control. So they were actually the first ones to act, and they relayed to mission control initially that we have contact, and then so there was some artistic license, but it worked. The same thing with Mattingly in the simulator. Mattingly was involved but he was kind of in the movie, he was kind of a personification of many people that were in that simulator, running, trying to find out that sequence. But, again, for the movie to keep things moving, it was easier just to make him the focal point rather than having 15 guys that probably wasn't that many, maybe 4 or 5 guys that jumped in there. But, but that all aside, the movie was pretty accurate. I mean,
very accurate. Everything I've read, I have a list of the changes in dramatic licenses, but everything I've read is one of the more accurate historical accounts out there as far as movie making goes. Like Ron Howard and Tom Hanks. He credits Ron credits Tom too. They both like really worked hard to make sure that this was, true, very, very true to what happened.
To go with Tom Hanks and being, accurate, he's always had that eye, because I look to a period piece like That Thing You Do that he wrote and starred, and I think he directed it, but everything is 60s, and it's down to like all the minute details.
I gotta switch out.
So
sorry, the sun goes too dark.
So I love the fact that everything is just so. And to go back to Rizzo's point of, it being his favorite Ron Howard film, Ron Howard's favorite film that he ever did, he said, is Apollo 13.
Yeah.
So
I believe it. I think it's honestly, I actually think it's his best.
I think
it's all his stuff. I think it's his best.
As I call him, Opie Cunningham. Little Opie Cunningham. And it was funny, of course. The other thing that's so funny is it had to be done was his brother, Clint Howard, had to be a mission control operator.
Well,
because it was he's like that perfect guy.
Yeah, he had that perfect like sciencey nerd.
He's the one that says, when Swaggert's talking about his taxes and he forgot to file it. That's no joke. They'll get him on that.
They'll get him on that, yeah. So it's not just his brother Clint, but his mom and dad both appeared prominently in the movie too. The dad, when Marilyn Lovell's watching it on TV at home, she's kind of sitting on the floor and there's a priest sitting on the couch right behind her. That's Dad.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Blanche Lovell, Jim Lovell's mom, is played by Ron Howard's mom. Oh, and she does an amazing job.
See, I knew about Clint and I knew about Blanche, but I didn't know about the dad.
Yeah, that's his dad.
I love her line. She's like, "Are you scared?" She's like, "Let me tell you, if they could get a washing machine to fly, my Jimmy
will land it." Yeah, she knocked it out of the park. That's all he needed from her.
Yeah.
So,
beaming with motherly pride.
Beaming with motherly pride.
She wasn't going. That and when Buzz and Neil come in, and she goes, "Are you boys in the space program too?"
Yeah. You boys pilots with my.
I don't know I don't even know if that was real, if that actually happened, but it was perfect for the movie. It did give everybody a chuckle for sure.
So I wrote down a few things that were real. I don't know about that. It is true that Marilyn, Jim Lovell's wife, she did have a nightmare and she did drop her ring down that's like right at the very beginning of the movie. That happened, but she was able to get it back again.
Ron Howard said that, when they tested the movie, that the critics found that the ring dropping into the drain was, in quotes, hokey.
Really? It
did happen, though.
I know it did happen, but they kept saying, "Oh, that's so Hollywood that would happen."
Yeah, it was foreshadowing. They didn't go with the whole triskaidekaphobia aspect of it, although that was there too. But it was a foreshadowing.
Yeah, and her dream where he gets blown out the door, that I guess did happen as well. But they do think that was only caused because they had just seen the movie Marooned, where that actually happened in the movie. They'd only seen it a few months before, and they think that's what triggered her. It wasn't that she was really thinking that something was going to go wrong. But again, it worked for the movie that, maybe she was having some premonition, don't go on this mission. Something's not right.
Yeah.
Of course, the whole thing gave credence to all the 13 people, that 13's like the superstition. Because it was the 13th hour, the 13th minute, or 13th,
the 13th day. May 13th.
They were just like, really. They did make a joke about it. Where Swagger, it's like, well, I had a black cat walk over a broken mirror under the lamp, and nothing happened. So I guess we're okay.
Yes, we're okay. Yeah. The vest thing. People assume for some reason that Gene Kranz having the vest delivered to him in Mission Control was like made up for the movie. Nope, that's true. That happens for all of his launches. His wife made him a vest. She made him over 40 of them over the years, and she would send him over to Mission Control for him to wear.
That vest is actually in a museum, and it's more so because of this movie than the actual mission, apparently.
Yeah, he raffled, or he was contributing to some fundraiser. A few of them got raffled off, I heard. But yeah, he had all the vests, so that part's cool. the hatch, when it first happened, 2 of them were in the command capsule, and Fred was in the command capsule. The other 2, I think, were in the LEM or somewhere. And when it first happened, they thought it was a meteor strike, and they were really worried about depressurizing. So they actually did attempt to close the hatch between the 2 vehicles. And the hatch, there's like one shot of Kevin Bacon trying to put it on. He's like, it won't fit. And that actually happened. Like, they couldn't get the hatch on. They're like, and then they moved on to the next problem. So
yeah, there was also, I guess, some license taken in the time that when Swigert hit the switches to stir the tanks, it wasn't as instantaneous as the movie made it. Like went and boom.
Yes.
There was a longer, almost like a minute and a half, I think, before the actual explosion happened.
Up at the top of the chat, everyone, if anyone's interested, at the top of the chat, I have posted some links. And one of them is the very first link I posted it's a YouTube video. It's about an hour long. It starts 2 or 3 minutes before the accident, and then it runs out for the next hour. And just the timing, hearing it happen live is fascinating. But the problem is you got to have a good ear when you listen to this, because it's not just Apollo 13 and Mission Control talking to each other. There's also flight directors having crosstalk. So you're gonna have to listen carefully, but if you're into that kind of thing, it is really interesting.
Yeah.
And the timings, a lot of the timings, it gives you a really good feel for it.
Yeah. And if you're really the other thing, did you post the link?
Yes, I did. I wrote.
San Diego.
I posted a complete transcript of the mission, and then I posted a little ways down. Awesome interview from 3 weeks ago. That is from the San Diego Air and Space Museum, and you guys, you should absolutely watch it.
Yeah, I watched that. I watched that live, and it was just amazing to have all those guys. They had Lovell, they had
Fred Hayes.
They
Lovell,
had
Gene Kranz.
They had Gene Kranz and the 2 other flight directors. That's the other thing. Everybody thought Gene Kranz was the only guy there the whole time, and that's not even true. In fact, he wasn't even there for a lot of the critical stuff. There's 2 other guys that were, because they rotate.
They had Glenn Lunny, who helped the power-up problem. They had Jerry Griffin, who was the other flight director, like Gene Kranz. And they had a guy named Milton Windler. I am not as familiar with him. I actually don't know what exactly. He was a flight director, but I don't know exactly what his role was. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a great interview.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was kind of giddy watching it, those guys being kind of.
Remember you sharing the link, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, so you can find it if you go to the San Diego. If you can't at the link, find the link or whatever. It's on their videos page for the San Diego Air and Space Museum, which I've been to actually.
Is it cool?
It's a cool little museum. It's not nearly as big as the National Air and Smithsonian, but it's pretty neat. It's been many years since I've been there. It was probably 98, I think, when I went. So
okay, I was 10.
What's that?
I said okay, I was 10.
You were 10.
I've been to the Smithsonian though.
Bruce is commenting back over on the Sci-Fi to Still Facebook page, and so I'm just going back to check what he's saying. Apparently, for some reason, he cannot comment over here on YouTube. I'm not sure why, but sorry, Bruce. We miss you. Thank you for listening. He's listening to us, but he can't comment.
Okay. That's weird. Yeah, I don't know why.
I think if you have to have like sign into YouTube, have a YouTube account, have a Google account, all that stuff.
Oh, maybe. Sorry, guys. Something was definitely wonky when we tried to launch. Although I did see it now that they said it. I saw that it launched on Facebook, but it didn't give me an indication on my computer here that it was actually live. So I'll play with it, figure out what's wrong.
So before MB goes on, continuing down her list, but so with the vomit comment when they were doing the filming for the 0G, each burst was 25 seconds.
Yeah,
there was
short.
612 dives for a total of 54 minutes of weightlessness.
Wow.
25 seconds at a time.
25 seconds at a time.
Yeah, because they have to do like a parabolic arc, and they only get the weightlessness at the apex of that arc, and then it starts to, and as it falls, and then eventually they have to pull up, and then so it's only from the top of that to when they're going down, they're actually in a free fall.
Yeah. So imagine filming those scenes 25 seconds at a time.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, you heard now just recently, I guess Tom Cruise is going to go do one in space. I don't know what movie it is, but so it's cheaper to send him to space than I guess to do the vomit comet thing. Crazy, but I guess didn't Bill Shatner say that when we saw him, he was working on a film where he was going to get shot into space.
Oh,
I don't know about that.
That's what he said when he was up in New York the last time. He was working on a show. They hadn't actually greenlit it yet, but he wanted to go into space. So
another thing,
who doesn't?
Slightly tangential, not necessarily tangential, but on a post-it note to that, Ron Howard called all of the, in quotes, astronaut actors astronauts. Where are my astronauts? And that those guys went and trained in the Vomit Comet and did all that training before filming. And they did so much better than the crew, obviously. Like they held their lunches in.
They don't call it the Vomit Comet for nothing. So, it's pretty cool that they were able to do that, but it made everything realistic rather than having anything on wires, to try to make. I'm sure there was some of that. They must have shot some of that stuff in the studio, I would think, but
I would think that you're right, but I think some of the more, the scenes where we really, really see the zero G that's
when they were playing with the whatever was the food, and he was kind of doing the catching it, and that I think was real, because it could have been the CGI at that time wasn't good enough, I don't think, to make it look. I think the exterior stuff was good enough to make it look real, but I don't think any interior work would have looked. I think we would have noticed that didn't look right.
Mm-hmm.
So today they probably could pull it off. Not then. Talking it was what are we talking? 20, 25 years ago. So not a new movie. It was 95, right?
Yeah, 95.
So 25 years ago. Yeah.
Time. Where does it go?
I know.
It came out right after Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, and Tom Hanks had just won Oscars for both of those, and it came right on those heels.
Right.
I remember it so clearly.
And in typical Tom Hanks fashion, right after that, he began working with HBO on the show From the Earth to the Moon, the miniseries. Which, if any of you have not seen that, I highly, highly, highly recommend. I can't even recommend that series enough. It is probably one of the two best miniseries HBO ever produced, with one of the other one being Band of Brothers, which ironically, again, another Tom Hanks was involved in that one, because he did Private Ryan, and then he got into the World War II. We're gonna, it seems like he gets enthusiastic about topics, and then he wants to do more. So he was also the producer on that. But yeah, that's available on Blu-ray now, finally. And it's, I don't know, it's like 10 episodes or something like that. But really, really well done. Yeah. About the whole Apollo program, not just Apollo 13. So what else? We got any questions from our audience?
Not yet. They have been commenting right along and making some observations. Garth knows his stuff. Garth is already an aficionado of this, and he'd been making a few comments. He enjoyed the scene where Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were trying to distract the mother.
Yeah,
that was funny. He didn't know about the best ritual. So see, we've all learned something tonight.
Yep. Gene has one for every mission. So.
But yeah, so NASA gave Ron Howard unprecedented access. They told him he could film at Mission Control, which he actually ended up not doing it, but they said he could. They let him use the Vomit Comet, which is property of NASA, or part of the NASA program. He had all the transcripts, and I have posted a link up top to the complete transcript of the entire 7 days mission. It's like 700 pages long. Wow. And as you skim through it, you see lines pop up right from the movie. But despite having all that access, he still chose to do a bunch of stuff himself from scratch and recreate it for himself. And we were talking the other night about how he shot the liftoff when they actually took off, and Buzz Aldrin saw the movie and saw the liftoff footage and said, where did NASA give you that footage? What liftoff was that?
Oh,
And he had to say it wasn't, it was our liftoff. We made it.
Yeah, I mean, it was that good. It was that good.
It was accurate, yeah.
And
Yeah.
just like you said, all that stuff holds up even now to everything that we're used to now.
Yeah, I mean, I saw in the theater, and it was amazing to see that on a big screen. In fact, that's one of those movies they should probably re-release. They should have re-released it a couple of weeks. Well, nobody could go see it, but maybe they were playing.
You're absolutely right. They should have re-released it.
It's really, I'd love to see it. I saw it in a regular theater. I would love to see it in like IMAX or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because Fez is right. The effects, like nothing looked.
It doesn't look dated. Compared to a lot of things that are from that era of filmmaking. Like, to me, Jurassic Park looks dated now.
Yeah.
And that's looking at it through first a viewer and then what we used to do, that it looks dated. This movie, I mean, if you didn't know any better, you assume that we shot it the other day.
Yeah.
There are some things that date it, but not a ton.
Yeah.
Of things.
Yeah, I don't watch it and go, oh wow, that doesn't hold up, or that doesn't, it's not holding up over time. It's like you see some movies, like, there's a few movies out that have been, if you look at like 2001: Space Odyssey, the effects still hold up. I mean, they look as good as anything we get today. Of course, it was models, but so you can't really say that about a lot of movies.
Yeah, you can't.
You look at stuff and you're like, well, that clearly was made in 1972 or something like that. It's
Plus, it actually sort of helps in this instance that's a period piece, because you see stuff and you just think, oh, that's the 60s for you. Oh no, I'm sorry, 1970.
Right. 1970. Yeah, it was right, because it was almost a year after.
April of 70.
Yeah, it was almost a year after Apollo 11, because you remember we had 12 was in there between.
Yeah.
We had that one. But I always thought that one part I thought that was interesting and they did in the film, which was also accurate, was how the newscast didn't even carry the broadcast from the capsule, that it had literally not even a year later, it had become old hat, and and nobody, they weren't gonna interrupt regular television for what has become routine space travel,
which is a shame.
The public certainly wasn't routine to the guys on the ground or in space, but I don't think people really realized how dangerous it is going.
Well,
into orbit, let alone the moon.
But did you hear in the San Diego interview, Jim Lovell, he's like, you guys, you're strapped on top of an intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get on top, take a ride.
Yeah. I mean, of course they always say like the launch is the most dangerous.
That's my head exploding, not the missile. Sorry.
Just like a pilot would tell you, takeoff is the most critical phase of
takeoff and landing. Yeah.
And that's where most things will go wrong, and that's where you're gonna have the most problem. But and another thing that Lovell said in the interview, he was saying that where that explosion happened in the mission was the perfect time. Like if it had happened earlier or later for some reason, they didn't really extrapolate as to why. He said they probably wouldn't have made it back, but everything, they were in the right position for everything to work out, so they were able to get home. He said, so he says really there was a lot of luck involved in that whole incident. It could have gone really bad. I mean, so, but go ahead.
To kind of piggyback on the whole TV coverage, Ron Howard actually got Walter Cronkite to do a new newscasts for the movie.
Yeah, re-record his newscasts.
Yeah. The other thing, so my favorite scene of the movie is when the engineer's got the box of stuff and he dumps it down on the thing for the carbon dioxide filter, and he goes, "We need to make this fit this using nothing but this." Yeah, and they come up with it. I don't know why that's always my favorite scene, and I've used that in different work related things, where we kind of have a problem, and you go back to that scene and think, okay, this is what I have to work with. How am I going to make it do what I want to do with what I have in front of me, what I have access to. And I just love that scene because it just shows you how they were so inventive. They're literally using the cover from the mission manual and plastic bags and stuff.
And duct tape. Let's hear it for duct tape.
Right.
Duct tape can do anything.
They had rolls of duct tape on it. I mean, like I wouldn't even thought that they would have had duct tape, like rolls of it, but yeah, it was a lot of things. It's just you're almost like if you saw the movie and you didn't know that this actually happened, you would be like, this is too fantastic. It was like, there's no way this really happened. Like this.
Yeah. Yes, to our eyes, it looked bad and it looked maybe even unsurvivable. But in that interview, which I just popped over back to Facebook, and over on Facebook, Sue was saying, hey, can you post those links over there? Yes, I will post the various links over on Facebook too, so everyone can see them. But in that interview, they asked, I want to say maybe it was Milton Windler or maybe it was Jerry Griffin, one of those guys. Hey, did it ever seem hopeless? Did it ever seem like, oh, we're not going to make it? And, he said, no, it never, not once did. He said, we were just tackling it one problem at a time, and we were conquering each problem. I don't know if you remember, Rizzo, he said it was killing snakes. That was the phrase he used.
Yeah.
But he said, no, we were going to get there. It was just step by step by step.
Well, it's kind of like what Gene had said. He didn't say failure is not an option, but he said that. I think how they got the quote was, he's like, that was, we had multiple options and failure wasn't one of them. So I think that's where the guy came with the epiphany, failure is not an option. But I think that's right. I think I think Gene Kranz and all the other engineers were like, we're not going to lose these guys. We're just not thinking that. There's a scene where the guy comes up to Kranz and he goes, the president wants odds. What are the odds of getting these guys back? And they're like, we're getting them back. That's it. There's no.
We're getting them back. Period. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He did not say failure is an option. That was a creation of Bill Boyles, who was a screenwriter. But he did say we have not lost an American in space yet, and we're not going to do it now.
Do it on my watch. Yep.
Interestingly enough, that the guy who said we laid out all the options and failure was not one of them, it was actually not Gene Kranz. It was Jerry Bostick, who was yet another one of these flight director guys.
Right.
And his son, so that's Jerry Bostick, his son, Mike Bostick, worked for Ron Howard. And so he knew through his dad that Jim Lovell was getting ready to release a book. And he's the one who put the bug in Ron Howard's ear, say, hey, Jim Lovell's about to release Lost Moon, and it's an amazing story, and it should be a movie. And that's how they got the jump on buying the rights to the novel.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because it is based on It's based on the novel. A lot of people probably don't know that, by Jim Lovell. Captain Phil says when he listened to the audio commentary on the Apollo 13 DVD, Lovell and Marilyn cried when they sailed around the dark side of the moon, knowing they couldn't land. Yeah, I'm sure for Jim Lovell that was for all of them, but particularly Lovell because he had been there on Apollo 8.
Yes, he orbited 10 times.
He'd already been around, so he said, "I've seen it already."
Apollo 8.
Yeah, and he's like, I've seen it already. To him, that was, I imagine, all the work that they put, it must have been crushing. But I imagine at some point they're like he kind of implies saying, I just want to go home. At this point, we've had enough. And what was it, 7-8 days it took them by the time they did the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing was like 8 days.
That's a lot of time. If you've ever been to the National Air and Space Museum or any of the museums that have one of these capsules or LEMs that you can of actual size that you can look at, stick your head in, you will realize how tiny and small. I mean, on the movie, it kind of looks like it's fairly large and they can move around, but they're all pretty much shoulder to shoulder in that thing all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think I could spend 3 days, 4 days, jammed next to there's nobody, none of y'all I like that.
not just crammed in, but working with intensity.
Yeah.
Like working with, focus and intensity almost 24 hours a day. I know they weren't getting sleep. I know the flight surgeon was very concerned, particularly about Fred Hayes, who did really get sick. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's why these guys were handpicked. I mean, they went through a lot of rigorous training and you know, pretty much weeding out by NASA to make sure that they wouldn't crack, you know, under pressure. So, and that's one of the reasons they picked test pilots initially. You know, the Mercury missions, the guys basically hardly did anything. In fact, was it Shepard or John Glenn that basically insisted that they had to fly the thing, that it wasn't going to be just, he had to have some control. It wasn't just going to be a computer, that it wasn't going to be just a, you know, because originally the first one was just up and down, you know, we just got them into space and came right down. But they were insisting, no, if I'm going to fly, I'm not going to just sit in the thing and so I got to be able to have some controls, and he fought for it.
That's interesting, because they did rely not heavily, they navigated themselves too. But Apollo 13 did use and need their navigational computer.
Now that I'm talking about the original Mercury.
Yeah, I'm understanding. Look where they got. They went from
they had to you know, obviously they had to fly, because you know, they didn't know when they just started the whole Apollo project if they could even dock in space. Like that was like another whole thing. If you watch the HBO documentary, they go into all that, you know, Earth orbit rendezvous and you know, and all that stuff. And that's how they were going to come up. You know, the original plan was to land the whole ship like we used to see in the old science fiction movies.
Really?
It wasn't until lunar excursion modules and you know, the rendezvous thing came where they would have two separate vessels, that one that just went to the moon and one that took them home. That came later, and was actually originally poo-pooed, saying it was too difficult, it's crazy, we're going to land the whole thing. But then weight, propellant, the whole thing started to come into it, and this guy finally got. If you watch, you got to watch the docudrama.
Physics saves the day.
It really
right?
is good. What's that?
Physics,
I know.
Physics, man, like that's
it's like, well, there's a whole episode on just building the LEM and how they had to get it. Like Lovell makes a comment, you know, at one point that the skin of the LEM in parts is like literally like foil thin, because weight was everything. Weight was everything. So they realized the LEM doesn't need to fly in atmosphere, so it didn't need a lot of the protections.
Which to me is terrifying, because I'd be terrified of puncture. Like I'd be like, you know. But yeah,
they held up. They never had a problem with the LEM.
No, they didn't have a problem with the LEM. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, they didn't know before the Apollos. They didn't know if, even if we got on the moon, would we be able to get back off? Could we get back home again?
Yeah. Well, they had always said getting them there is not the problem. They could get somebody there very quick. It's getting them back. Getting them back was the issue.
Well, if there was anyone who could get them through this crisis, it was probably Jim Lovell. He, at that time of the emergency, had the most hours in space of any of those guys, even more than Aldrin and Armstrong, because he had been on Apollo 8. And like I said, he had orbited the moon 10 times. And his background, the poor guy, it kind of is interesting. He had always wanted to fly, and he tried for the Naval Academy. I believe he tried for if I understood him in his interview, if I understood him correctly, he tried for the Naval Academy like twice and didn't make it twice. And so he kind of settled for a something called the Flying Midshipman, which is what I understood to be like a ROTC program, if you guys all know what ROTC is. And if someone could explain to our Canadian friends, that would be very helpful. That program was about to be cut, but then the Korean War happened, and poof, all of a sudden they needed pilots, and he got accepted into the Naval Academy, and the rest was history. He had to resign the ROTC commission to accept the Naval Academy commission, which is kind of funny, but that's the way it went.
Yeah.
To piggyback on that, Tom Hanks is wearing Lovell's Naval Academy ring in the movie.
Oh, is he really? Oh, that's awesome. That's cool.
The other thing with Lovell is Lovell's left-handed and Tom Hanks is right-handed, and Tom Hanks didn't want to write with his left hand.
Oh,
so that's it. Yeah. But one thing I was thinking while you guys were talking, we heard Rizzo's favorite scene. I want to know what your favorite scene is, MB.
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't my favorite scene until I heard the backstory. I like when he's sitting, he does it on Earth first. He's looking at the moon and he's covering it with his thumb. And then when he's up in the LEM or the command module, which one, he's looking out the window and he sees the Earth. And that was Tom Hanks being a brilliant actor, because he did that only because he had heard Lovell mention in an interview that when he was up orbiting the moon in Apollo 8, he would hide the Earth behind his thumb. And he, everything, family life, mundane problems, politics, war, love, life, death, everything that humanity knows could be hidden behind his thumb. And he found that incredibly humbling. And Tom Hanks heard him say this in an interview or just picked up on it somewhere and decided to incorporate it into the movie. And I thought that was brilliant. I love it. Before that, any of the scenes where, where there's, remember Matt Damon in The Martian, we're going to science the hell out of it. Before that, any scene where they were sciencing the hell out of it, the scene where they make the square filter fit in the round hole, the scene where Gary Sinise Ken Mattingly is trying to like fire up the right sequence so they wouldn't use too much juice, like any of that stuff I loved. But the thumb thing, that's just Tom being brilliant. And it really kind of captures, I think, in essence, that we'll never know being on Earth what it's really, really like to be up there and look back at your planet. Yeah.
See, for me,
it's humbling.
Yeah.
Humbling.
For me, my favorite scene actually is something you just mentioned, Gary Sinise in the practice.
Yeah, the power up sequence.
But even that usually is my thing. But I'm gonna go a little bit back for it. Like right before he goes in, he's like, "Don't give me anything. I want it. Whatever conditions there are up there is what I want down here. I need a flashlight, and I need a flashlight. Is that what they got up there?"
That's the flashlight they have.
Yeah, that is the flashlight. Yes. He said, I want a flashlight. I want it cold. I want it dark. Whatever they're happening, whatever they're experiencing, we're going to do that. Yeah, you're right, Fez. That's a great call. That's a great scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just keep thinking to all the Star Trek stuff that, I always liked the sciencey scenes too. But with this, it's like, you know what, these group of men, everybody at Mission Control is trying to just get these guys home. And it's, jury-rigging this, jury-rigging that.
Yeah.
Figure something out. And that's more than the stuff up in space, which I really, really love. That's what I always look to. Because granted, those guys are up there experiencing what they're experiencing. These guys are the guys that got them home. Those guys are the heroes.
Captain Phil's asking if I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but he was asking if what the mother said about landing the washing machine was real or not. I don't know if that was something she actually said.
Great question, Captain Phil. I don't know.
Oh no, you'd have to ask Ron Howard, I guess. That one. My guess is that was probably
artistic license. Yeah, I would think.
But I don't know that for a fact.
I see Garth says, I would be worried about putting my elbow through the wall of the lamb. Yeah, you know what, Garth? So would I. Like, that's thin. And they did it in another movie too.
I don't think it's like the walls.
Oh, maybe it was The Martian.
There's probably behind a control panel or something. It might be that thin. I don't think it's anywhere where you'd actually be able to like push your finger.
But in The Martian, didn't he take off from Mars just covered with a tarp or something?
Well, yeah, because the air was so thin. Now Martian is definitely fiction.
That freaks me out because then there was another movie where micrometeors came pew through right through the walls. Remember, what's his name? Jerry Connell had his hand up and it went through his hand. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I've only seen that movie once, but yeah,
if anybody remembers that movie, can you type it for me? Because I can't remember. Anyway, that's what I'd be afraid of. Like tinfoil? No, I need protection, please.
So I was thinking just now, the one thing that bothers me about Apollo 13 is probably the depiction of Jack Swigert, where he's the, in quotes, green pilot when in all actuality, he was just as competent as everybody else. And he, in fact, wrote the emergency procedures.
Yeah. Yes. Lovell even addresses that, that there was never any, they make the comment like, oh, if he screws this up, we're not going to the moon, with the docking. There was never any of that. And they even said if for some reason Swigert couldn't do it, Hayes and Lovell were
Yeah, they're all
perfectly
three
capable of
pilots.
doing it.
Yeah.
And but they had never had any he wouldn't have been up there if there was any doubt in his ability or his skill. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. He wasn't stuck in, he was the backup to begin with. I mean, he was a qualified astronaut and qualified.
They were all three
Rambo.
PIC certified. So
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
so,
You're right.
I mean, that was again for drama.
Yeah. Drama, their argument, the tensions where they kind of sort of quasi accused him of like, well, it's your fault because you stirred the tank.
Yeah.
That was complete artistic. Yeah. I genuinely believe.
And I believe it probably was. Like I was saying earlier, these guys are all professionals.
Because you have to create tension. Otherwise it's a flat movie. It's like one of the guys was saying when they were at Mission Control, Ron Howard always wanted people moving in the background. And the flight director was like, it wasn't like that. We were all sitting at our stations doing our work, but you have to create tension.
Yeah.
And someone who's angry and tense, but sitting still doesn't convey it. But people scurrying and maybe having urgency, that might convey the tension a little more. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's clearly, it was a movie that is a movie. It was there to make money. It wasn't a documentary. So you have to make it interesting. I think he did a great job of that. But with staying into the true nature of the incident. I mean, it didn't completely, make it so wild and to make it
like I said,
a fun movie. And it was, the funny one, it's a good movie when the outcome, these guys make it back.
Like Titanic.
We've known that for a long time. And you're still kind of going,
or Miracle on the Hudson. Yeah. Another time.
Are they going to make it?
Yes.
They're going to make it.
And you're like, well, how do they make it?
But it's still like got you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
To me, that makes a very, very good film because you've done it well. I mean,
I agree with you. That was just a little nitpick that I personally had. I mean,
nothing is perfect. I mean, but I really, there's very little I could nitpick on this film.
Very little.
I just, maybe I just look at it with rose-colored glasses because of my love of the whole space program. But
no, you're fine. It's an awesome testament to our can-do abilities. Just time check. We are kind of getting close into the hour. I will point out one other thing that Ron Howard did that was kind of interesting, talking about building tension or creating something that wasn't there. He shot as much as he could in sequence. And he actually learned that trick from George Lucas when he shot American Graffiti with George Lucas. American Graffiti takes place over the course of a night. So George Lucas decided to shoot in sequence over the course of the night. So at the end of the night, by morning, they were exhausted the way you actually would be if you'd spent the night doing what they did in the American Graffiti. So Ron Howard did that too. And it worked especially for any of the scenes up in space. They would kind of shoot in sequence and shoot these long nights, and the guys were getting tired. They were dragging, but they had to kind of push through, which is not unlike the situation the guys were really in. And he just made it work to his advantage to get what he needed out of his actors. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
A couple other little things that were inaccurate in the film was the scene where Lovell is walking and talking. I forgot who he's talking to, but they're at the crawler that's moving.
Oh,
the ship from the final assembly building to the launch pad, and it said 2 days before launch. That was inaccurate. That thing moved like 2 months before launch, or something. It was like months or weeks. That was an artistic license. The other one was the scene where there's the road at nighttime and the astronauts are on one side of the road and the families are on the other side of the road and they're giving their one last goodbye. They didn't want them. They were social distancing so that they wouldn't get any kind of last
second diseases.
That actually does happen, but it didn't start till the shuttle missions.
I heard that too, that wasn't happening.
That was again kind of added in that never really happened during Apollo.
Yeah, they just needed that dramatic goodbye. Yeah. So if you guys, 7:54, we got a few more minutes and we can keep talking. If you are not already listening or watching Roy Belquist's companion live stream, Roy does Remembering Sci-Fi of the 60s and 70s. He's kind of like, since we're doing the 80s and 90s, he's kind of our companion show. I'm hoping Roy will type in the comments what he's going to be doing this Friday. And again, you guys should be listening to Fez's podcast, Fez Talks. And I got to tell you, I haven't heard the latest one with Max, but I've heard the one where he's talking to Brian and Alex about Picard. And that's actually a really interesting conversation. And I agreed with a couple of the points that they made. So rock on, Fez.
Just
Keep
a couple.
going.
The rest of it, she was like, "This is all wrong."
Yeah, the rest of it was crap. No, I'm kidding. It was actually a really good conversation.
So
Rizzo, can you tell us what's coming up?
we have a next week is really gonna cool, and I got to make sure I get all these technical glitches out of the way. But I am really, really excited. We're gonna have Doug Drexler come on, and we're gonna go off of our normal format of sci-fi of the 80s, 90s, and aughts. We are gonna do Doug's favorite movies. So we're gonna cover everything from the 30s up to God knows when, whatever he's gonna talk about. Anybody who knows Doug Drexler, and you guys who don't know him, he's a visual effects artist. He worked on Star Trek with the Okudas. He's worked on Battlestar Galactica. He's won an Academy Award. He's won Emmy Awards. So he's a really great guy. If you have never met him, he's very animated.
Awesome.
Where that hour is going to fly by. So we're very excited to have him next Wednesday. He's going to come on the show and talk about Doug stuff. So have your questions. Of course, if you want to ask the Star Trek stuff, I'm sure he'll answer it.
He might answer BSG. He might answer Orville. Maybe we don't know. Maybe not. He might have an idea.
He's currently working on the Orville. So I don't know how much he'll be able to talk about that. But we'll try to ask him anyway. Maybe he'll reveal some Orville secret to us. But so definitely tune in. We'll definitely punch it. Like I said, no specific topic other than Doug's favorite movies.
Doug's favorite movie. It could be anything. I'm excited.
Yeah, very excited. Doug's a great guy. So
I love listening to his stories. So
you could just, that's why
he has so much energy and enthusiasm. He's just like,
and he's as bored as the rest of us, so because he's not working. He's doing if you follow him at all on Facebook, he's been doing cooking videos with his wife. So
yes. And other stuff.
Yeah, Doug stuff. Exactly.
Doug stuff. He's been doing Doug stuff.
So anyway, what else we want to wrap up about Apollo 13 now that we're almost at the end of the hour? Again, I want to apologize for the streaming glitch. I don't know why Facebook, and then it started to stream, but it didn't tell me it was streaming. I hate Facebook.
Yeah, I think it's a little easier. I'm noticing that it's hard. I see the chat, but I can't just click like on things the way I used to. I'm feeling like I like Facebook better, so I hope it's
I like it better too, but this is just so much more stable.
This is way more stable. Yeah.
Oops, I just banged my knee on my desk. That's why everything looked like it was an earthquake.
Okay. So guys, we will let you know as best as we can where we are if we're on Facebook or YouTube. And I'm hoping for Facebook next week, but we'll go where we can get it out, where we can actually air the show. So
if you don't have a Gmail account or something, get one that way. I guess if you can't, I guess you need one to actually comment.
Yes, you gotta.
I think anybody should be able to watch it, though. I don't think you need an account to watch it.
Yeah, and they've popped back over to Facebook, see what they're saying over there. Yeah, they've been listening to us. They just can't. They're talking amongst themselves over on Facebook, and I feel bad because.
Yeah, I'll try to sort it out. I don't know why it didn't work.
Oh, Dave, Fez, you were asking about favorite scenes. Dave Lafredo says his favorite scene was always Tom Hanks explaining to the son how they fixed the Apollo 11 problems.
Apollo 1 was the fire.
Because the son knew that there had been a fire and he was is it the door? Like, do you remember? And then later on when the mother says, your daddy's spaceship is broken, and the kid's like, is it the door? Yeah, Dave, that is a fantastic scene.
That's in my top 2.
Yeah.
Bruce's room. I was talking about Jim Lovell. Yeah, 715 hours in space, and he never touched the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was his last mission. He never flew again, but Swaggart did, I think.
Or Swaggart was supposed
Swaggart to. Didn't. Was it Hayes? One of them did. One of them ended up going right through to
Mattingly. Mattingly went.
Mattingly went to the shuttle.
They think the movie I was thinking of where the meteorite punctured was Gravity. I didn't
see that. That was with Sandra Bullock and Clooney, right?
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. But
I will post, guys, if you are interested in those links that I posted at the top of the YouTube chat. I will post them over on Facebook too. Of all of them, please go watch the San Diego Airspace
Watch
Museum.
that. You have homework. Watch that. Go rent or
From the Earth to the Moon.
From the Earth to the Moon. Those two things. Those and watch, and you'll have a new appreciation for the space program, the Apollo program specifically.
Absolutely. Garth, maybe you'll be on VHS next week. Yes, Garth, maybe we will be on VHS.
Yeah, who knows at this rate. I really apologize, guys. At least we got this working, so it's better than nothing, right?
Betamax.
I will take this video and put it on Facebook the next day or two so that it will be there for people to watch as well. Of course, you can watch them are on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. So, and I turned them into a podcast too if you want to listen to us babble while you're driving.
Babble.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, it is 8 o'clock.
Hey, thank you.
Any last final thoughts before we give our...
No, but I'll say cheers to our audience on both platforms, people who hung in there on both platforms. God love you.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you so much.
With all the glitches. So have a good night. Stay safe. Stay separated. And we will see you next week with Doug Drexler.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you.
Guys.
Bye.